The day had arrived. It was supposed to be the happiest day of Chamaka's life. The day she would walk down the aisle in front of her loved ones and marry the man she had been set up with, Choki. The air inside the church was thick with excitement, the kind only a wedding day could bring. The guests, adorned in their finest clothes, sat in rows, whispering amongst themselves, their voices low with anticipation. The women, sparkling in bright colored gowns, seemed to shimmer under the soft lighting. The men, polished in their best suits, looked every bit the part of dignified guests attending an important event. The ceremony had not even started, and already there was an overwhelming sense of celebration. Chamaka, however, was not in the mood to celebrate. As she stood at the entrance of the church, ready to walk down the aisle, her stomach churned with uncertainty. The wedding gown she wore was an exquisite piece of lace and satin that shimmered in the soft light, fitting her perfectly. It hugged her curves and accentuated her shape. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled elegantly in curls that cascaded down her back, decorated with tiny white flowers. She looked every bit the beautiful bride people expected. Yet inside, she felt a gnawing sense of dread. Her mother, Ugozi, stood beside her, her face beaming with pride. Ugozi was proud of her daughter, her only child, the one she had raised with so much love and care. Chamaka could see the pride in her mother's eyes, the joy that today her daughter would be married to a man with status and wealth. The union was arranged between their families, an alliance of two powerful households. It was a marriage that would surely bring happiness and stability, or so everyone thought. But as Chamaka gazed at her mother, who was squeezing her hands, there was something unsettling in her chest, a quiet fear, a disquiet she could not shake, gnawed at her. "Are you okay, my daughter?" Ugozi asked, her voice soft but full of concern. Chamaka nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, Mama, I'm fine, just a little nervous." "Don't be," Ugozi replied, brushing a stray strand of hair from Chamaka's face. "Your father and I raised you right. You're a beautiful woman inside and out. Today is your day. You're about to marry a good man." But Chamaka didn't feel as though she was marrying a man who valued her. She felt as though she was marrying someone who had no interest in her dreams, her ambitions, or her inner thoughts. She could still remember the first time she met Choke at a family gathering. He had been charming then, but as their relationship deepened, cracks began to show. His charm was a mask, behind which lay controlling tendencies, emotional distance, and a disregard for her needs. Her father, Chief Odion, had passed away years ago, but his voice still echoed in her mind. He had always told her to trust her heart, to never settle for less than she deserved. But in this moment, as she stood in front of the church, the eyes of the entire community upon her, Chamaka wasn't sure if she had trusted herself. Everything had moved so quickly. Chioke had been persistent, and their families had orchestrated the union without truly considering her feelings. As the choir's voices filled the air with joyful harmonies, Chamaka's heart felt heavy. She walked slowly, each step feeling like a weight on her chest. The guests stood, smiling, nodding, some whispering among themselves about how beautiful the bride looked, how perfect the union seemed. But the closer she got to the altar, the heavier the air became, and the more uncertain Chamaka became about what she was walking into. And then she reached the altar, where Choke stood waiting. His immaculate black suit was perfectly tailored, His shoes gleamed in the light, and his broad smile stretched across his face as he waited for her to approach. His eyes, though, scanned her up and down, assessing her, appraising her as though she were a possession, something to be admired, not someone to be cherished. His gaze was cold, sharp, no warmth, no connection. It felt as though the world had tilted slightly, and Chamaka's stomach dropped. She could sense his eyes narrowing as he looked at her, and that quiet, familiar unease swept over her again. The moment she reached him, Joki took her hand. She felt the weight of his grip, but his words would shatter the fragile world she had built. Is this what you've become? His voice was low but filled with unmistakable disdain. You look ugly. For a moment, Chamaka blinked, confused. She couldn't have heard him correctly. She had to have misunderstood. But as she looked into his eyes, the sharpness there told her everything she needed to know. His words pierced her like an icy dagger. You spent all this time in the mirror for nothing. Chioke continued, his voice growing louder now, the words echoing in the silence of the church. Honestly, all this makeup and dressing up, I don't know what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't this. Chamaka felt her knees weaken beneath her. The weight of the words crushed her, and for a moment, everything in the church seemed to blur. She could feel the heat of everyone's gaze on her, could hear the whispers, the shocked gasps, and the growing murmur of disbelief. Her heart pounded in her chest, and tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, not wanting to show weakness. Her mother gasped in horror, rushing forward. What is wrong with you? This is your bride. But Choke didn't even acknowledge her, his eyes fixed solely on Chamaka, full of contempt. I don't know what your mother was thinking. I should have known better, Choke said dismissively, his words colder than ever. Chamaka's world crumbled in that moment. The future she had imagined, the man she had once hoped would be her partner in life, stood before her, tearing her down, humiliating her in front of everyone she had ever known. Her chest tightened as the whispers grew louder. The world seemed to spin around her, and she felt dizzy with disbelief. I think we need to talk, Choki said, his tone casual now, as though nothing had happened. Not here, though. We'll talk at home. But Chamaka could not respond. Her body trembled, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't organize. What was she supposed to do? What could she say? She was paralyzed by the weight of everything that had just happened. Her mother's arms were around her, guiding her away from the altar. We're going home, my daughter, Ugozi whispered, her voice breaking. You're not going to stand here and let him humiliate you. Chamaka's feet moved almost automatically, as though in a daze, as she was led out of the church. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know what was happening. Her mind was a whirl of emotions, betrayal, anger, hurt, confusion. As they reached the back entrance, Chamaka heard the faint sound of Chioke's laugh, self-satisfied, cold. It was the sound of a man who had just broken her heart and was pleased by it. Her mother held her tightly, pulling her away, but Chamaka felt as though her world was falling apart with every step. The image of Chike's words, his coldness, his judgment, was etched into her mind, and she felt an unbearable weight in her chest. The bright light of the outside world seemed too much to bear after the darkness of the church. It was all too overwhelming. When they reached the safety of her room, her mother wrapped her in an embrace, holding her tightly as if trying to protect her from the pain. It's okay, my daughter. It's okay. We'll figure this out, Ugozi whispered. But Chamaka couldn't breathe. Her chest was tight, her heart shattering. The weeks that followed the failed wedding were long and filled with an overwhelming mixture of emotions. Chamaka's life, which had once seemed so carefully planned, had suddenly been unraveled in a single moment. The pain, humiliation, and heartbreak lingered long after the last guest had left the wedding venue, and the reality of her situation weighed heavily on her chest. Her mother, Ugozi, had been her unwavering support throughout the entire ordeal. At first, Chamaka could barely bring herself to leave her room, the sting of Chioki's cruel words still fresh in her mind. The warmth of the outside world seemed too bright, too harsh, and she found herself pulling away from everything she once knew. But Ugozi, always gentle yet firm, never let Chamaka retreat for too long. One morning, after several days of silence, Ugozi knocked softly on Chamaka's door. My daughter, you cannot stay in your room forever. Life continues. You are stronger than this. Chamaka didn't respond immediately, but her mother's words struck a chord within her. How long could she hide from her pain? How long could she avoid confronting the reality of her situation? Slowly, Chamaka rose from her bed, walking over to the window to look outside. The sky was bright and clear, and for a moment she thought that maybe, just maybe, there was hope on the horizon. Over the next few weeks, Chamaka found herself taking small steps forward. She ventured out of the house more often, no longer confining herself to her room. She began to visit the cafe she loved, spending quiet afternoons with her journal, writing about her feelings. It was a form of therapy for her, a way to process the whirlwind of emotions she had been too afraid to confront until now. She wrote about her anger toward Chioke, her hurt over the betrayal, and her fear of the future. But she also wrote about the strength she was discovering within herself, the strength she never knew she had. Her mother, too, had been patient, offering quiet encouragement. You have always been strong. Chamaka, you have always known who you are. This is just a chapter in your life that you must learn from. The future holds many things for you, my daughter, things you can't yet imagine. In these moments, Chamaka realized that she had spent so much of her life living for others. For Choke, she had tried to be the perfect woman, the perfect bride, the perfect partner. She had put aside her own needs, her own dreams, in the hope that pleasing him would lead to happiness. But now, as she began to regain control over her own life, she realized that she had been neglecting the most important person of all, herself. One afternoon, as she sat in the park near her home, Chamaka met with her closest friends. Ada, her best friend, had been there for her from the beginning. Ada had been the first to call her after the disastrous wedding, urging her to stay strong and not let Choke's cruelty define her. Today they sat on a bench in the park, the cool breeze rustling the leaves around them. Ada reached out, placing a hand gently on Chamaka's. I know you're hurting, Chamaka, but you have to see the truth. Chioke wasn't the man you thought he was, and you deserve better than what he gave you. Chamaka looked at her friend, grateful for the support. I don't know if I'll ever be able to love again. I don't even know if I want to. Ada smiled softly. Love isn't something you force, Chamaka. It's something that happens when you least expect it. But first, you need to learn to love yourself. I know it's hard, but you are enough just as you are. You've always been. The conversation left Chamaka with something to think about. Ada's words were true. She had never truly allowed herself to embrace her own worth. Every decision she had made, whether it was her relationship with Choke or the choices she'd made to please others, had been motivated by the desire to meet the expectations of everyone around her. She had never stopped to ask herself what she wanted, what she needed. As the days passed, Chamaka began to spend more time doing the things she loved. She took up painting again, a hobby she had abandoned in her pursuit of perfection in her relationship with Choke. The paintbrush glided across the canvas, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of calm and joy. Each stroke was a release of pent-up emotions, grief, anger, hope. Through painting, Chamaka was reconnecting with herself. One evening, as she sat in her room after painting, Chamaka reflected on everything she had been through. She had always dreamed of a perfect love, a fairy tale ending. But now she understood that real love wasn't about perfection. It was about respect, trust, and kindness. Choke had never respected her for who she was. He had seen her as a possession, a thing to be admired, not as a person with her own desires and needs. Now, Chamaka knew that she couldn't go back to that life. She couldn't return to a love that made her feel small, unnoticed, and unimportant. Instead, she was learning to love herself. She was finding a new sense of freedom, one that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Her mother had always told her to trust her heart, and Chamaka was starting to listen. Her heart was telling her that there was more to life than the love of a man who didn't value her. It was telling her that she was worthy of happiness, of joy, of a love that was true and kind. And though the path ahead seemed uncertain, Chamaka knew one thing for sure. She was ready to walk it, one step at a time. Several months had passed since Chamaka had walked away from the wreckage of her wedding, and with each passing day, she felt a little stronger. Life, though still full of uncertainties, was becoming more manageable. She had learned to navigate the world on her own, without the crutch of a relationship that had never truly been healthy. Her friend had rallied around her, offering support, laughter, and the comfort of shared moments. But there was one thing Chamaka had never quite let go of: the possibility of love. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Chamaka decided to attend an art gallery opening hosted by one of her close friends, Ada. The gallery was small but vibrant, showcasing the work of local artists. Chamaka, with a new sense of self, wasn't particularly interested in finding someone to fill the emptiness she had felt after Choke. But something inside her wanted to get out, to re enter the world and enjoy the things she had once loved. As she wandered through the gallery, her eyes caught a figure standing alone by one of the paintings. He was a tall man with a calm presence that seemed to fit the quiet atmosphere of the gallery. His dark eyes were focused on the painting, but there was a depth to his gaze that intrigued Chamaka. She approached him, drawn to the quiet energy he exuded. Ada, spotting Chamaka from across the room, hurried over with a smile. Chamaka, I'm so glad you made it. You've got to meet Michael. He's one of the most grounded people I know. Chamaka glanced at Michael, who turned toward them with a soft smile. His presence was warm, but not overbearing. He didn't look at her like she was someone to impress. Instead, his gaze met hers with quiet respect, as though he saw her for who she truly was. They shook hands, and Chamaka felt an instant connection. As the evening unfolded, Chamaka found herself talking to Michael more than anyone else. The conversation flowed easily, filled with mutual respect and curiosity. Michael didn't try to impress her with grand gestures or elaborate compliments. Instead, he simply asked about her passions, her thoughts, her experiences, and Chamaka found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone in a long time. Over the following weeks, Chamaka and Michael continued to spend time together. They took walks in the park, visited art exhibitions, and talked late into the night about life, love, and everything in between. What stood out to Chamaka was how different Michael was from Choke, where Choke had always been self centered, dismissing Chamaka's thoughts and feelings. Michael listened intently, offering thoughtful responses that showed he truly cared about what she had to say. Michael didn't try to change her. He didn't make her feel like she was too much or not enough. He simply accepted her as she was. And that, too, to Chamaka, was a love she hadn't even known she needed. One evening, as they walked by the lake near her home, Michael turned to Chamaka. "I've really enjoyed getting to know you," he said softly, his voice sincere. "I think there's something special between us. If you're open to it, I'd like to explore that." Chamaka felt a heart flutter, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something different. Hope. Hope that love could be kind. Hope that maybe it wasn't too late for her to find a love that respected her for who she truly was. "I'd like that too," Chamaka replied, her voice steady. And in that moment, she knew that she was ready to open her heart again. The weeks following Chamaka's chance encounter with Michael had been a whirlwind, but in the best possible way. For the first time in months, she found herself looking forward to the future. The shadow of her failed wedding was beginning to fade, and with each passing day, the sense of heaviness that had once weighed her down seemed to lift. Michael had come into her life like a calm breeze, offering her warmth, respect, and a quiet but unwavering support. He didn't rush her, didn't pressure her, and never made her feel as if she were an obligation. He was simply there, and his presence was a gentle reminder that love, real love, could be everything she had been missing. As they spent more time together, Chamaka found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. They shared the stories about their childhoods, their families, and the paths they had taken to get where they were now. Michael's past was as full of lessons as Chamaka's, though they were very different. He had never been married, but he had faced his own share of heartbreak, disappointment, and the complexities of growing into the person he was. Through their shared experiences, they began to see each other not as two people searching for something, but as two individuals who were growing into their best selves. One Saturday, Michael invited Chamaka to his apartment to watch a movie, a simple evening, nothing grand. She had never realized how much she longed for such simplicity until she was in his space, surrounded by the quiet warmth of his company. Michael was not the kind of person to sweep her off her feet with elaborate gestures. But there was something about the way he paid attention to the small details that made Chamaka feel safe, appreciated, and cared for. That evening, as the credits of a movie they had watched together began to roll, Michael turned toward her. His face was calm, yet there was a spark in his eyes, a tenderness that made Chamaka's heart beat a little faster. "I'm really glad you came tonight, Chamaka," he said softly. "I know you've been through a lot, and I want you to know that I'm here for you. I don't expect anything from you, not right now anyway, But I do want you to know that I see you and I care about you. Chamaka's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard a man speak so openly about his feelings without expecting anything in return. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was something far more important, an affirmation of respect, patience, and a deep desire to truly understand her. I care about you too, she replied, her voice quiet but steady. There was no rush, no pressure to make grand declarations. Just two people sharing an honest moment in time, and it was enough. Over the following weeks, Chamaka felt herself growing more comfortable with Michael. They continued to explore their connections, each moment bringing them closer. What she loved most was how Michael treated her. He was never dismissive, never condescending. He valued her thoughts, her opinions, and even her silences. He didn't demand to be the center of attention, and he didn't try to mold her into someone she wasn't. With him, Chamaka felt like she could finally breathe again, like she could simply exist without the weight of others' expectations. Michael was not perfect, but he was perfect for her. Where Choke had been controlling and distant, Michael was understanding and patient. He never judged Chamaka for her past, never made her feel like she had to prove herself. Instead, he encouraged her to pursue the things that made her feel whole. They spent hours talking about their dreams, some shared, some different, but always with the understanding that both of them were worthy of pursuing those dreams, no matter how big or small they seemed. One afternoon, as they sat on the steps of a cafe they often frequented, Michael brought up something that had been on his mind. You've been through so much, Chamaka, he said, his voice gentle. But I think you're stronger than you realize. You're not just beautiful on the outside. You're strong, capable, and so much more than what you've been through. I want you to know that no matter what happens between us, I'll always respect you for that. Chamaka looked at him, feeling a lump form in her throat. It wasn't often that she heard such affirmations. Choke had never seen her strength. He had only seen her as an object, a means to an end. But Michael, despite all the flaws and uncertainties in her past, saw her for exactly who she was. It made her feel seen, heard, and valued. I don't think I've ever really heard those words before, she said, her voice cracking slightly. But I'm starting to believe them, Michael. I'm starting to believe that I'm strong, that I'm worthy of love, and that it's okay to be me. Michael smiled, reaching out to take her hand. You've always been worthy of love, Chamaka. The right love doesn't force you to change who you are. It supports you as you grow. And I want to be part of that growth, if you'll allow me. Chamaka's heart fluttered in her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of the future. She didn't feel like she had to be anyone other than herself. Michael wasn't asking her to be perfect. He was simply asking her to be real. And for the first time, Chamaka felt like she could do that. As their connection deepened, so did Chamaka's understanding of herself. She began to realize that she wasn't defined by her past or the mistakes she had made. She was not the woman Choke had tried to mold her into, nor was she the broken-hearted bride who had walked away from the altar. She was Chamaka, strong, capable, and deserving of love. And Michael, in his quiet, respectful way, was a reminder of that truth. One evening, as they stood by the lake near Chamaka's home, Michael turned to her, his gaze full of warmth. Chamaka, he said, his voice low. I want to take things slow. But I think what we have is something special, something real. And I want to explore it with you, if you feel the same. Chamaka's heart swelled with emotion. She didn't need grand gestures or promises. She simply needed someone who valued her, who respected her, and who wanted to walk beside her as an equal. I feel the same way, Michael, she replied softly, her voice filled with sincerity. Let's take things one step at a time. Ayu, as they stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Chamaka realized that, for the first time in a long time, she was not afraid of what the future held. She had already faced the worst and had come out stronger on the other side. And with Michael, she felt like she was ready to take the next step, a step into the future, one that was full of possibility, understanding, and love. As the days turned into weeks, Chamaka's connection with Michael deepened. Every moment spent together brought a sense of peace and warmth that she had never known before. Where once her heart had been broken, now it was beginning to heal in ways she hadn't imagined. With Michael, there was no rushing, no expectation, just a shared journey of two people learning to trust again, each with their own scars, but also their own strength. Chamaka had spent so much time building a life around the expectations of others, her family, her community, her relationships. But now she realized she was finally building a life for herself. She had always thought she needed a man to complete her, that love would somehow fill the empty spaces she couldn't see in herself. But Michael had shown her that she didn't need someone to complete her. She was already whole. The quiet evenings they shared together, sometimes watching the sunset by the lake, other times walking through the city streets, were a reflection of how far Chamaka had come. Each shared silence was a reminder that love didn't need to be loud or showy. It could be simple, grounded in respect, mutual support, and understanding. The more time she spent with Michael, the more she felt like herself. There was no pretending, no need for facades. With him, Chamaka could let her guard down and simply be. One evening, as they sat together in the park, Michael turned to Chamaka with a thoughtful expression on his face. He had always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was always with a quiet conviction that made Chamaka listen closely. Chamaka, he began, his voice filled with sincerity. I want you to know how much I admire you. You've gone through so much, and yet you continue to rise above it all. I can see the strength in you, even when you don't realize it. And I want you to know that no matter what, I'll always support you. Chamaka's heart fluttered. It was a simple declaration, but it meant the world to her. She had never had someone like Michael in her life before, someone who didn't expect her to be perfect, who didn't try to change her or put her in a box. He saw her for who she truly was, and he respected that. I've never had someone support me like that before, Chamaka said softly, her voice full of gratitude. I'm still learning how to fully trust again, but with you, I feel like I can. I feel safe. Michael smiled, reaching out to gently squeeze her hand. You don't have to trust all at once, Chamaka. It's okay to take your time. I'm here for you, no matter what. Chamaka's eyes filled with emotion as she looked at him. She had never realized how much she needed to hear those words. Their relationship with Choke had robbed her of her sense of worth, had made her feel like she wasn't enough. But Michael made her feel like she was everything. As they continued to talk, Chamaka couldn't help but think back to the woman she had been just a few months ago. She had been lost, broken, unsure of herself, and afraid to let go of a past that had kept her stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and self-blame. Now she was standing on the edge of something new. She was no longer the woman who had walked away from her wedding in shame. She was no longer the woman who had felt invisible, unworthy of love. She was Chamaka, the woman who had chosen herself, the woman who had rediscovered her voice, and the woman who was finally ready to step into the future with hope. And it wasn't just Michael who had helped her see this. It was the journey she had taken on her own, one of pain, loss, healing, and ultimately self discovery. She had come so far, she had walked through the fire and had emerged stronger, with a clearer sense of who she was and what she deserved in life. A few weeks later, Michael invited Chamaka to dinner at a small, cozy restaurant he had been raving about. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a simple dinner to enjoy each other's company, but to Chamaka, it felt significant. They had come so far, and she felt a sense of peace about the direction the relationship was taking. She had learned to take things slow, to not rush into anything, and to simply enjoy the present moment with him. As they sat across from each other, the soft lighting of the restaurant casting a warm glow around them, Michael looked at Chamaka with a tenderness that made her heart swell. He wasn't the kind of man to make dramatic proclamations, but in that moment, Chamaka didn't need anything grand. She just needed the quiet truth of his gaze. I don't know what the future holds, Michael said quietly, his voice full of calm certainty. But I do know that I want you in it, Chamaka. Not because I need you to complete me, but because I want to walk through life beside you, sharing everything that comes our way. Chamaka's heart fluttered as she took in his words. It wasn't a promise of forever. There were no guarantees in life, but it was a promise of respect, support, and a shared journey. For the first time in a long time, Chamaka believed in the possibility of love that was built on mutual respect and understanding, not on expectations or control. I want that too, Michael, she said, her voice full of warmth and sincerity. I want to see where this goes, to walk through life beside you. But most of all, I want to keep growing, both on my own and with you. The conversation lingered in the air between them, light and comfortable. As the evening unfolded, Chamaka felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She was no longer bound by the past, no longer afraid of what the future might bring. With Michael, she knew that whatever came their way, they would face it together. The next few months passed by in a haze of quiet joy. Chamaka and Michael continued to grow closer, their bond deepening with every passing day. There were no grand declarations of love or promises of forever, just a mutual understanding that they were walking the same path side by side. One evening, as they walked along the lake, the setting sun casting a soft golden glow over the water, Chamaka took Michael's hand in hers. I used to be afraid of love, she said, her voice filled with honesty. I thought it meant losing myself. But now I see that love doesn't have to take away from who I am. It just adds to it. Michael smiled, his fingers gently brushing hers. Love, when it's real, should always add to who you are. It should help you grow, not change you. Chamaka nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep in her heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she realized that the future wasn't something to be afraid of. It was something to embrace, something to build with the right person by her side. And with Michael, she felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the best was yet to come.